Yeah, welcome to the second English Future Speaker series of this semester. We have here one of my former students, Pat Siebel, and I think I had Pat back when when I first came. But you graduated in 2015, so I came in about 2012. So I had Pat in a couple of classes, I think, but. He graduated back in 2015 with a bachelor's degree in English right here at Coastal. He also got a minor in creative writing. And then he went on to Virginia Tech and got an MFA in creative writing from there. Really good program. Pat came back at some point, I forget when it was, but Pat for a little time did come back as a teaching associate for about a year here at Coastal again before he moved on to a couple of other positions. I'll let him tell us all about those different positions, but Pat's been working as a writer in the business industry in a bunch of different things. So yeah, I'm just going to open it up and let Pat tell us about himself and take it away, man.
Sure. Hey, everyone. First of all, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. See some familiar faces in the chat. Sorry if I'm a little scatterbrained. It's been a super long day at work. I will do my best to answer any questions, cover all of the necessary territory. No need to be super formal. If you have a question, feel free to interrupt me. We can have a good time here. So I figured I would go ahead and start off and talk about sort of my path. It's been a strange path for me. So I'll take a few minutes just to describe my journey like to, through, and past my time as an English major at Coastal up to my current position. So like Dr. Hasty said, I think I came into Coastal around 2012, and they sort of plopped me into his 400 level advanced linguistics class, and I had no educational background in English. I was a heavy reader. I thought that I was a good writer, and I was quickly humbled in that regard. But I had no business in his class, and I tried really hard. And luckily, he's a phenomenal teacher. But before that, it's 2011, and I'm working full time at the Myrtle Beach International Airport, and I'm living out of my car. It's a small Toyota Yaris, and every night after work, I would just, load up my trunk with blankets and go to sleep, and then wake up and clock in at the airport and do the whole thing over again. And just to start this off with sort of a disgusting story, I was at work one day, and as a baggage handler, we have this thing we have to do where we service the plane in like really small areas. So we have to hook this hose up to like the lavatory and empty the entire thing out. And, apologies, this is a sort of a visceral story. The coupling detached and everything just fell on me. By that point, I'd been at the airport for probably 3 or 4 years already. And it was at that exact moment where I was like, I'm not doing this for the rest of my life. I'm about 22 at the time. Already had one failed attempt at college. Around my lunch break, I decided to go to Coastal and enroll as an English major because it was what I always wanted to do. It was what I thought I should be doing. And that lavatory breaking on me was just enough to get me in there. So I enroll on my lunch break, and I tell all my friends and family and coworkers about it afterward. And after I enrolled, I heard a lot of the same things that you probably heard. My bosses told me I was stupid. I had a good job. My family questioned whether or not it was the right move. My friends told me there was no job market and to do something more lucrative. But at the time, I didn't know whether it was for the better or worse, but I ignored all of their advice and I enrolled. And so here we are. It's probably fall semester 2012. And I want to take a second to say that I mean it when I say that I did not take a single moment of my time at Coastal for granted, because it was everything that I had ever wanted up until then. I was studying the only thing in the world that I cared about. I was surrounded by brilliance and mentorship, and it was my home, and it was my vacation. It was my respite from the rest of the world. And so I spent 3 years at Coastal. I was the editor of Tempo magazine for 2 years. I was also still working at the airport for 20 to 30 hours a week. So it was a really, really busy time trying to get through my degree in 3 years. So after Coastal, I move on to Virginia Tech. While I'm at Tech, I'm a GTA, so I'm teaching 2 classes per semester, working for literary journals like the Minnesota Review, the New River, and I'm also a delivery driver at Panera. So again, doing a whole lot there. And then let's expedite the story a little bit. Afterward, I decided to come back and teach at CCU for a while. I loved it. I loved teaching. I'd probably go back and do it again, but a lot of things happened. A lot of change happened in my life, and I sort of became fascinated with this idea of change in 2018. And so I decided just to take everything I had and move from Myrtle Beach to Charlotte. I didn't have a job when I got here. I had been promised a writing job that fell through basically the day that I moved here. So for the first 6 months or so of living in Charlotte, I worked at a tattoo shop on the weekends for $250 a week. And every other day I got on like a electronic scooter and scootered around the business district uptown in a full suit, just walking into places and asking if they were hiring. I was calling recruiters, anybody who would take the time to talk to me, and asking if there were, available positions for somebody with next to no writing experience who had just come out of, being a teacher and was looking for a career change. Nothing happened for 6 months. And then one day I got a call from a recruiter I'd spoken to at like 7 a.m. And it was just this really serendipitous moment. And they were like, hey, so we had hired somebody for this role at Wells Fargo. It's a technical writer. And they didn't come in for the first day. Can you be here in an hour and a half? So I had to jet up to Wells Fargo for like this impromptu interview that I hadn't planned for at all. And I was uptown an hour later with a pressed suit, and I was hired on the spot. They gave me a laptop and they told me to go with no training at all. And it was such a weird place to be because I was in the financial realm, which I had no experience in. It was what I felt was my first like real job after grad school. And I had no clue what to do. They just gave me a cubicle and a laptop and told me to go at it. And the meetings were put on my calendar. And it turned out my expectation was to take meeting minutes. So, I had to write all of these action items, takeaways, next steps, and all of these things that came out of the meetings. And one thing about the corporate world, and especially in finance, is there are so many acronyms. So when they're talking, they're saying things like, let me give you an example. So the acronym for a managed resource, which is a contractor, which I was at the time, is MRS. They pronounce it MERS. I was also working in a system called Mars. So they were like sort of switching between saying MERS and Mars. And I worked in a division called CIB, and we were working in a system called CIV. And they were saying all of these things, and they expected me on my first day to know exactly what I'm talking about and write down these really clear notes. And it was a complete mess. I had no idea about the expectations. A lot of people wanted these, really high level notes. I was told this term high level, which really confused someone like me who obsesses over language. Like high level to me would denote proficiency or technicality, relaying information at a level above average. But in the business world, it means almost the opposite. It's, skeletal in general, and the most important items in the most concise language possible. Long story short, I was really, really bad at this job, but I was content because my team was fun and my bosses had seen contractors come and go. They seemed like they were like fairly used to ineptitude. So I was like, okay, they can deal with me for a while. That was a 6-month contract that ended the March that COVID hit. So they didn't renew my contract. I had no idea what I was going to do again. And it turned out to be sort of serendipitous again in that I was offered another contract. So this sort of serendipitous interview came along a couple days after my contract ended. And it was a role that I had no idea what I would be doing again. It was called a UX procedure writer. I had heard about UX. I of course know what a procedure is, but I had no idea what this looked like. So I remember the job interview. Coming from an academic background, I I spoke about rhetoric in narratology. I think I dropped discourse communities and rhetorical situations in some context that I can't even recall. I had no idea at all what to say. And the recruiter basically got back to me a couple of days later and they were like, yeah, we don't know if you have the skill set for this. The hiring manager thought you were smart, but like, you just don't have the experience right now. I was like, okay, I totally understand. And here's the start of the most important lesson that I can probably offer. Always, regardless of how you think you did, write a thank you letter. And more to come on that in a second. But I wrote the hiring manager a note telling him that I appreciated his consideration. I understood his position regarding experience. And then I told him to let me know if a more suitable role ever came around. And that note did it. The next day, he called me and I was hired as a procedure writer. So that takes me into my second contract with Wells Fargo. As a procedure writer, I was basically a second set of eyes on existing procedures. I would reread existing procedures, and my role was to determine whether I, as a new user, would be able to perform the processes that were outlined with the directions given. And if not, it was my job to rewrite them and make them usable. So I'd have to identify where there were gaps, where something just didn't make sense to me, or where it seemed like the instructions were guiding users from step A to step C instead of from step A to step B. And I would work with these subject matter experts to break down the processes so that I could do my rewrites. Or I would find ambiguities in the language, places where people could get tripped up, and I would rewrite that content to make it clearer. You guys might remember Wells Fargo in the news a couple of years ago for things like opening up extra accounts for people. And there was a whole lot of regulatory repercussions, and they were in a lot of trouble. A lot of that was, there were issues that came from the top, but also procedures were just written terribly. So they would have these new bankers and branches. Somebody would ask to open up an account, and there wouldn't be clear directions on them to be able to do that. And so they would accidentally open two accounts or open a checking and, a savings, and they would reroute the money into the savings, or they would, open up an extra mortgage. There were these nebulous problems that were all coming from really terribly written procedures. And so my team was brought on to rewrite all of that stuff for, regulatory purposes. I loved that job. It was like putting puzzles together all day, reading those things. But I got tired of being on contracts and I wanted stability. My contract got extended for an additional year because I was doing good work, but I left when I was offered a full-time position in a similar role in another department at Wells. And that brings me to my last role, which was called Technical Writer 3. And it started out great. I was working for this team called Operational Documentation Excellence, which sounded like I wanted to be doing. I wanted to be writing good content. And that's exactly how it began. I was writing high quality, usable procedures. And might get a little too real, but whatever. This new boss came in. The boss didn't come from a writing background and wasn't very good at their job. And writing these good procedures that we were hired on to write, so that there weren't all of these regulatory repercussions, took a backseat to production numbers. So an inherently qualitative job quickly became quantitative. And I've always been obsessed with these arbitrary expectations that I set for myself. If I'm not the best at something, or if I'm not at least proficient at something, I just sink into depression. So I did exactly what I was asked. And I became the best producer on the team, but I was hating myself for shirking off what I knew was the most important part of the job, which was making procedures that worked. And I started having these debilitating panic attacks, and I couldn't leave the house for a while. I tried once and I had to pull over driving because I thought I was having a heart attack, and I was absolutely certain in that moment that I was going to die. I ended up, because of the production expectations in that job and my fidelity to having to fulfill them, I was hospitalized twice for just really terrible anxiety and blood pressure. So I left. And that brings me into my current role. Toward the end of my tenure in my last position and with Wells Fargo, a recruiter reached out to me on LinkedIn. And they told me about this position within a well-established company called Dentsply Sirona that was essentially a startup within the larger company that had aspirations to basically become the company in the future. And, I had my full-time job. I was miserable, but I, um, I didn't necessarily need another job. And that gave me this weird confidence with knowing that I didn't need this job, but I absolutely wanted to still explore other possibilities. So when I was talking to the recruiter and the hiring manager and the vice president, I was just really calm and really clear about things that I'm normally a little apprehensive to talk about, like salary expectations. Coming from where I've come from, it's always been really hard for me. I think I've always just been okay with whatever because I've trained myself through the years to think that I was lucky as someone with 2 degrees in the humanities to even have a job. But I want to take a moment to make something really, really clear that English majors, especially in cities like Charlotte, are so coveted. You are wanted and needed, and there's so much more to come on that. But I was feeling bold as I was interviewing, and I asked for a salary way out of any amount that I thought I would ever ask for. And after my interview was done, I of course sent out my thank you letter as I always do, and I was offered the position. And when I was offered the position, not only did they tell me that my thank you letter is what set me apart from the other final candidate, but they topped the salary I asked for by almost, it was over $25,000, and they included a 10% yearly bonus. So one thing is like when you interview, I've always had, I'm not the best interviewer in the world. I've tried, but when it comes to salary and stuff like that, I just sort of get in my shell. And I think that a lot of my friends who come from English backgrounds do the same thing, but train as much as you can on that stuff. If you have friends who are willing to interview you, that's one thing that I would suggest is just start nailing the interview process. Once you can do a really confident interview and, convey your expectations and what you need, places have a confidence in you that they wouldn't otherwise have. And I guarantee you that you are more likely to get what you want. So now I'm the lead content writer at Dentsply Sirona, and this job has basically taken everything that I've ever learned and some things that I still haven't, and put them together into this hybrid role that's part and parcel with startups. So I'm juggling this hybrid like project manager, product owner, business analyst, strategic developer, user experience specialist, content developer role. But at the heart of it is everything that I learned as an English major. Things I learned in literary theory class, like critical thinking and the ability to deconstruct ideas and analyze their key components. Things I learned in creative writing classes, like curiosity and empathy and kindness and communication. And of course, just like an undying obsession with language and good writing, good communication, the ability to clearly and concisely convey your thoughts, which is a pretty radical departure from me as an undergrad. I had this weird fascination as an undergrad with, postmodernism and maximalism and, using big words and, these long circuitous sentences to try to convince myself that I was smarter than I actually was. And I fooled myself for a couple of years, but I didn't fool any of my professors, as they will tell you. But yeah, I can't overstate the importance of just being able to write clearly, getting all of your thoughts into cleanest possible sentence. And I would suggest if any of you ever have the opportunity of taking Dr. Kellogg's form and style class for that, it really helped me harness a lot of that in my last semester as an English major. And I would have been a lot better of a writer throughout my, career as a student if I had taken that earlier on. Coming to the end here, I can't say too much about my day-to-day responsibilities in this new role because my team, which is currently comprised of 5 people, is working on a classified product. I had to sign an NDA that I wouldn't discuss any project specifics, but long story short, our 5-person team is going to end up restructuring the operation of a 30,000 person company in the next few years. So I get to unveil what we're doing at a convention in Las Vegas in September. And I'm really excited because I'm super passionate about what I'm working on for one of the first times in my life, which is really, really gratifying. So I'm still new here, but so far I've just been mapping out strategic initiatives and goals, trying to figure out what kind of content that I'll need to write as we progress through product development. And if that all sounds like a huge abstraction, it absolutely is. Luckily, English majors tend to be pretty good at reifying abstractions. So there's value in that. A lot of work in the corporate world is intangible and strategic and abstract. And it took me a while to figure that out. A lot of the time, it feels like nothing is getting done. And a lot of the time, it seems like a lot of ideas and words with very little action. And it is, but a lot of people aren't, as well trained to deal with intangibles as we are. So all of that essay writing and, finding narratives and, using literary theory to sort of fish out things from narratives that may or may not be there. All of that really, really comes in handy. And it's something that you never think would benefit you in the professional world, but the better you get at it, it really and truly does. Now that I'm in the dental industry, I hear all these terms come back from my linguistic days with Dr. Hasty that I could have never foreseen becoming a part of my professional life. So it's been fun. It's been a cool journey in the professional world, seeing random things from random aspects of my life as an English major become these important parts of my day-to-day activities. And I'll stop there. And I think there's a couple things in the chat
This is Triply. May I ask a question as the others prepare?
Absolutely.
One, it's incredible and moving, and just amazing how humble you are about all that you've accomplished, but also just how much you've accomplished is pretty impressive. So thank you for sharing your time, your expertise, and your experience in such a gracious manner. Oh, well, it is a pleasure. So one of the things which occurred to me as you were talking is that very often as an English major, students tend to, one, undermine their own skills. And they also are, as you were, it seems, willing to settle for, say, something that they feel like they deserve, which might be a lot lesser than what they might be valued at in the corporate sector or other worlds. So I was wondering and you did say that we should practice negotiation and so on, but what are some things that you would ask our students to concentrate on in terms of the skills that they might not be aware of that they have, and how might they market themselves using those skills? So things that you didn't know you had until you got on the job, and now you know you have them, and they associate with things that were part of the English major. I don't know if I'm making any sense, but
yeah. I'm trying to bring that all in. So let me think. As far as like finding skills that you can translate into the professional world, the first thing that I would say is, spend your time as a student being the best student you can. I had no aspirations as far as what I would be doing when I was a student. And so my primary goal was just to be a sponge and absorb as much as I can. I was really, really impatient. And Jason Ockert, who I can see is in here, he would tell me that all the time. He would tell me how impatient I am. And I think he would really get frustrated with me. But that impatience with myself made me have to learn everything, whether it be, my creative writing stuff, or whether it be linguistics, or whether it be comp and ret, creative writing, biology, math. Like I gave everything 100%. And Jason was always like, hey, if you want to be a creative writer, just do the creative writing thing and ignore everything else. And I wanted to, in my heart, I really wanted to do that, but I could not bring myself to. So I guess the first thing I would say is to not think about the professional world as contrary as that sounds to this speech. Just learn everything that you can, and those things absolutely will translate when you need them to. What was the other part of the question?
The other part, I suppose, is more in that advanced level when you gain some level of self-consciousness about your skills and um, had nothing to lose, so to speak. So you asked your potential employer for, say, a salary that you thought was high enough,
Yeah.
and that element of negotiation was something that I was wondering if you could talk about. Was it skill specific? Could you say something to the effect that, well, these skills are valuable in this context, and therefore you should pay me X? Or was it a more general way in which you went about it?
I mean, so yeah, it was definitely one, you always have leverage if somebody reaches out to you and they ask if you would be willing to apply for their job. So one, I had that sort of initial leverage, and I came from a background that I thought, based on the job description, made me a really good fit. I have written policies and procedures, and I would be working for this startup within a company that needed everything broken out from the ground up. So they needed to establish policies and procedures first and foremost, and then, all of the content development from there on. I've of course had experience in writing creative content, writing technical content. So I thought that I was in a really good place, but most of it just came from feeling really comfortable with what I've learned as a technical writer, feeling really comfortable professionally, and just feeling comfortable in that I didn't necessarily need that job. And it was almost an experiment to me in seeing like, hey, like this is like a lesson in confidence. Let's see where like being overly confident this one time is going to get me. And being overly confident for that first time got me into the coolest role that I could ever imagine.
I
I have
see.
a question. First, I'd just like to say congratulations
Yeah.
on everything that you've accomplished thus far, and I really believe that you're gonna go really, really, really far in what you're doing. This is honestly the first time I've ever sat and listened to someone who is in the field that you're in, and oftentimes I hear, because when people ask me, what are you going to school for? And ultimately, I'm going to school to teach high school English. But of course, I have to be an English major first because Coastal doesn't have a secondary English program. But I mean, whatever, it doesn't matter. But when I tell a lot of people that I'm an English major, they're always like, well, good luck finding a job. But I'm just like, well, dang, like, is it really that bad? But sitting here listening to you, I kind of realize that like English is an umbrella and there's a lot of things that's underneath it that you could in fact make a very good career out of and make really good money from. So I'm extremely hard on myself, and Dr. Hasty can kind of agree with that because I ask like a million questions every class.
Good.
So I just wanted to know, at what point did you realize, like, okay, I'm doing fine. Let me just, sit back a little bit. I mean, of course, continue to stay on top of myself, but not beat yourself up for things that you may not do as well on. How did you go about doing that?
Your question was when I stopped doing that?
Yes, like
No.
what you never did.
No, I still do. I mean, I can say this for everybody that I know in my world. Imposter syndrome is real, and it is just about permanent. One of my people on my team, she's been with the company for 12 years, knows every product inside and out, knows everybody in the company, just has the best relationship with everybody, literally knows everything that you can know about the company. And we were talking about it today on the elevator, and she still feels that exact same imposter syndrome as she did on her first day. So it's something that I think you just have to learn to live with. And I wish I had better advice, but it's always going to be there to a degree. And I think that you get better at dealing with it, and it probably subsides to a degree as your confidence grows. But I think for somebody like you or I, it's always going to be there to a degree.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
I know it's not the answer you wanted to hear.
No, it's okay. It's an honest answer.
So I'll go ahead and read this. This is from Sam asked, would you say it's a better use of time in college to just go with the flow and try to go with what pops out at you and what your brain clings to? Or should you go along with one set of career goals? So that's a question.
Yeah, it's a good question. And again, like what works best for me won't necessarily work best for anyone, but I don't know if I did necessarily either of those things. By nature, I'm not a go with the flow person. I'm very rigid and scheduled, and I need to be, really, really organized, and I'm hyper obsessive about things. So in terms of going with the flow, I was always really rigorous with anything that I did. But I know what you mean in terms of not focusing on a singular career goal. I would say lean toward going with the flow over focusing on one career goal, because that career goal, I don't know what year you're in, but that could change from freshman to sophomore to junior to senior. That could grow. I mean, the job market is constantly changing. You don't know what's going to be out there when you graduate. A lot of the jobs that I see now weren't even relevant fields 5 to 10 years ago when I was in undergrad. So I wouldn't focus on a singular career goal. I would not go with the flow necessarily, but I would be open to everything, I think.
Yeah, sure. First, Pat, I want to thank you first for both doing this and also for your candor in the way you've told your story. I think that's really important. And I guess this is a little bit of a follow-up to Sam's question, maybe, or to Tripti's. Are there courses that you wish you had taken, or are there like things that you're thinking about where you're at now? And I'm not saying this just to pitch for courses that I happen to teach in like technical writing or business writing, but it is the case that those tend to be filled with business majors and not English majors, and some of that procedure writing, or the use of acronyms, or even the kind of very lean writing that comes in. And I'm not. I guess I am a little bit trying to kind of like see if your answer lands in that area, but if it doesn't, I mean, that's also fine. But I'm sort of curious how you think the prep went in terms of what you where you ended up landing, which is just a wonderful story.
Thank you. So again, I want to reiterate that everybody should take your form and style class.
Thank you.
That I regret not taking your business writing courses. I think I would have been a lot better on day one in my first role had I done that, and had I, understood some common business jargon and roles. So there's definitely that. There are days when I was like, should I have been a business major, or should I have done a dual major in business? And I can contemplate it every day, and I always come back to no, because I found value in places that I wouldn't necessarily have expected to. Every day I find myself using things that I learned in creative writing, in comp and ret, in linguistics, in every part of my English education. And I work in the business world, and everybody here has a business degree. It's not as coveted as people with special degrees like we have. I think that it taught me how to think better, which is why I'm able to do a lot of strategic development. It has it's given me a whole skill set that the business degree I don't think necessarily offers in the same way. What did Jason say here?
No, what I said was completely practical and boring, but I think it would be a good thing that Kellogg could possibly teach. I wanted to just ask you about the Milwaukee Bucks, and
Stop.
nah, well, they had a good time, but no, man, I'm just so proud of you that that you've found your way, and it's exciting to see these positions here too, and my heart jumps to my throat a little bit when I hear you pulling off to the side of the road there, and some of that other stuff in between. So, my hope is that, you come up with capable ways of, pulling off from the side of the road and finding these other spaces. And I like this comment about, getting towards that space of confidence that isn't, it isn't just surface level, but it goes a little deeper than, that which is at the surface. And I think that's super important. I don't know, man. I just love you, and I appreciate you coming and doing this stuff.
Hey, thanks, man. Plug. After you read Jason's new book, which you absolutely should, one book to segue back into your note about writing follow-up thank you notes that I would read is called What Color is Your Parachute? And that book is so valuable to somebody who is coming out of college and figuring out what sort of field they want to get into. It's also valuable to somebody like me. I read it just this year as I was sort of transitioning into a new role. And it helped me write the thank you note that got me hired. It helped me think about what I wanted to do in different ways and how I could utilize my skill sets in creative new ways. So what color is your parachute? I forget who writes that, but a definite suggestion after you read Shadow Self.
So this is somewhat related, I suppose, to what you were talking about. And I was taking a note on What Color is Your Parachute, which is such a beautiful title. Another observation I have made, and this has something to do with, the anxiety that you were feeling, as a sort of ethical dilemma, right? That you were feeling. And in some ways, I would argue that that is probably why you are exceptional at what you do, in that you have that sort of integrity to the labor, but also an integrity to the promise you're making to yourself and also others. But a lot of times I observe that our students are worried about not having that next step all lined up already, in a way that a business major is made to believe institutionally and socially that they have the next step lined up, the pre-med student and so on. So the English student is supposed to land on their feet without that parachute. So what are some of the survival strategies you might recommend for our students who don't already have a plan A or a plan B? Emotional, skill-based, whatever you have to offer, I think would be welcome.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I guess the most pragmatic one that I have is when you graduate and you hit the job market, start researching, these headhunter companies, these recruiters, and get in touch with one of them, because chances are, unless you have experience in the field, you are not going to get hired with an English major right away into a full-time position. So what most people have to do is just, find a recruiter who will, listen to their story and figure out what their skill set is through conversation. And then, basically carve out a territory for you. You tell them, hey, I like doing this. I'm good at doing this. I can see myself doing this. And they'll basically tell you all the roles that can fit your skill set. And if you find a really good recruiter, and you don't have to commit yourself to one, you can talk to, 10 of them at the same time, and you find someone who truly understands you, they will find you a role eventually. It might be 6 months down the road. It might be a year down the road, but it will absolutely happen. And, if you are looking to move away from Conway after you graduate, say, you want to move up to Charlotte, 2.5 hours away. I already know a lot of recruiters. My neighbors on both sides of me are recruiters. So I'm always trying to help people network and, get the best position possible for them. So please reach out to me and I'll help you out. And I can be that, emotional safety net that you often need during that really indecisive time. I'm more than happy to do that because so many people helped me along the way as well. So, if you see yourself, if you're amenable to moving to Charlotte and taking on a writing role or an editorial role or, a strategic development role somewhere, reach out to me. It's, just patrick.siebel@gmail.com. Add me on LinkedIn. Always willing to have a conversation about that stuff.
Pat, I kind of have a follow-up to that question. Because this is something I find with a lot of our students, a lot of our graduates, that they don't really know what to look for And a lot of these titles that you were given of things that you had done, of technical writer, UX procedure writer, and all these different things may not sound like things that we could do just because we don't know the lingo. So could you share some, like, what are the words that you would look for now, knowing what you know now, for someone that just got a fresh BA in English and they're looking to find a job? What should they even be looking for? What are the kinds of jobs, the words to search for, and the things that you could help them out with that?
Yeah, so if you're like on a jobs website and you have your little search field, I would isolate words like of course, writer, editor, but also words like content, communications, developer, even sometimes they call it like content developers, UX. I think it's one of those things that again, like just like working with a recruiter would really help you on, because the lingo is so much different in this world than anything that I was ever used to as an English major. And when I first started hitting the job market, I was just typing in writer everywhere and I wasn't finding it. So working with a recruiter to sort of translate some of that into corporate titles is really helpful. Also, LinkedIn. So setting your skill set on there, having your 5 skills all lined up, and then putting your job notices on, and they'll sort of tailor things to you too. LinkedIn is always going to be your best friend. That's how I found every single job that I found since moving to Charlotte. So, having a good LinkedIn profile is an art. It takes a long time. It's just as important nowadays as building a good resume. So that's it's super important work.
I have a question in regards to that. As far as like LinkedIn, right? Okay, so of course, if like we're in college right now, and I'm a junior, and of course, I don't have any experience in like publishing or like being a creative writer and all that good stuff. So how would you market, like what's the best way to market yourself being a newbie, if that makes sense? Because of course, like right now I don't have this long extensive resume with all this stuff, like so how do you do that?
Yeah, that's a really thoughtful question. I want to be able to give that a really thoughtful answer in return. So I guess the first thing I would say is that the opportunities are there to start developing your resume right now. I can trace every writing and editorial job that I have ever had back to my experience with Tempo magazine. Without that experience, I wouldn't have gotten my position in grad school. And without that position in grad school, I wouldn't have gotten my first job at Wells Fargo. Without my job at Wells Fargo, I wouldn't be in my current role. So my best advice is just to take every opportunity that you can, because you're building your resume right now. You're building your portfolio right now. Every opportunity that you need to jumpstart your professional career is already in front of you. Work in student media, work in the writing center, take that internship. All of that work is, really rewarding, both in the immediate present and the uncertain future. So, I would look into all of that stuff and all of the opportunities that you have. As a secret, don't tell anybody, but I've always used Tempo magazine editor on my resume as like a job. I completely isolate that from, being a student. And so it's a real job, but nobody knows that, oh, that's a student media thing that only students could do. It's just in my resume, just like all of my other jobs are. And that's served me really well. So that's a resume hack.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of resume hacks, I absolutely agree that with Pat, that people should take the opportunities that they see, and also try to find opportunities if they don't see them. So Nija, if you're involved in a club or a civic organization or a religious organization or anything like that, figure out a way where you can do some writing and then manage to get that on your resume. You want to think about just things you do in your day-to-day that are possibly convertible into resume items. When people put together their LinkedIn, and they say, I'm a senior at Coastal, and that's their main tagline. That's not enough. You have to be doing stuff during college and seeking things outside. So any kind of volunteer writing or activities that could get on the resume. Another sort of, and I don't mean to put off Tripti, another little bit of a kind of a resume hack, but also a way of thinking about job descriptions as data that I give when I talk to English majors about putting their resumes together. If you go to sign up with Indeed or ZipRecruiter or any of these places or LinkedIn, and you gather a bunch of jobs that you might be qualified for, but might not, or ideal jobs you'd love to have, get all the descriptions together, put them in a single text file, all the descriptions, get 25, 50, or 100 descriptions, put them all in a single text file, create a word cloud from that file. There are going to be some big words that pop up. Okay, how can you get some of those into your resume? How can you get some of those into, because those are the things that are in the descriptions that people are looking for commonly. The big words are the ones that come up. So you can think about the job descriptions as data sources, not just places to go. So if you aggregate those and get that, a slight trick on that is get an email that you only use for job search, because otherwise you'll be inundated with all of these things from Indeed or ZipRecruiter or whatever, and then you can just pile on the job descriptions in that way. Anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you.
100%. Always tailor your resume and always use the job description for the language that they're using, and integrate that into your resume. That is 100% phenomenal advice.
Yeah, and just real quickly, I wanted to piggyback on that as well too. And then was things that you can do right now to build that resume so that you don't get to the end of 4 years here and say that that's the only thing listed as you got a degree, is seek out internships. So the university has tons and tons of internships available that you get college credit for. You can take it as a class. So instead of taking a class, take an internship, which will get you on the job training in something, and it'll get you a line on your resume, some practical experience, and your foot in the door somewhere. Our Department of internships will find you a resume, will find you an internship anywhere. Some of these can even be done if you're not an in-state student. They can find you internships back home, so you could do one over the summer if you're from the Northeast or something, or out of town. So that is something that I know that our students in the English department do not take enough advantage of, and I couldn't push more that I feel like everyone should do an internship at some point to help build that resume and give you something that when you graduate, you've already done some work, so you have some experience, and some of the things, some of the words, some of the lingo to sling around and to be searching for. So that's just another thing. But
again, thank you, and I will say this without reservation, that among the many English Future Series speakers things that I have been involved in or been part of, this is truly inspiring, because you've really drawn out the arc without holding back on the difficulties and so on. So I think that's really helpful, and I'm very grateful for that. So a two-part pragmatic type question. So a lot of our students want to be writers, right? So one of the most common things we would hear, despite what track we're teaching in or what our expertise is, we hear that they like to read and write, and they want to be writers. And there is a sense that you can only write if you, say, become a sort of expert writer. And for that, you need a graduate degree and so on and so forth. So I was wondering if you think having a graduate degree is essential. If so, why? And if not, what do you think the average undergraduate student with an English degree can, and you've already talked of how to market themselves and so on, but well, I suppose the basic question is, do you think the graduate degree is an essential thing, or is it just a helpful tool? And I don't mean just in a sort of diminishing manner, but is it essential? That's the first question.
Yeah, and it's a really good question too. And again, it's something that I've thought a lot about. When, I think your bachelor's degree is so important in terms of the education you get and actually having the degree. For me, just to continue, as candidly as possible, having a master's degree has been more helpful to me than getting the master's degree. So, in an MFA, it's a lot of time writing. That's basically what the master's degree is. You've learned most of the tools that you need at that point. An MFA allows you the time and resources to write. So it's helpful in that, you have the time to polish some of the skills that you don't necessarily get to polish as an undergrad because you're taking a million different classes and you don't have time to, write the perfect essay or write the perfect story. You just don't have the time to go through the drafting process in the right way. But I think the graduate degree, in terms of an MFA, is valuable in this world, but I think it's more valuable in terms of you have the piece of paper, you did the thing, than the process of, the education that you get from getting it.
So the vast majority of our students are women, and technical writing, and this is something, David, you could talk to, I'm sure, but a lot of techne speak is designed to alienate a lot of people, but very specifically alienate women. So I was wondering what, in your experience, is the sense you have of technical writing as a field in the context of gender. Are women writers welcome? Are they plentiful? Is the world of technical writing highly macho? That's the question I have.
So, I can't speak in terms of like the entire world, but in my experience, teams have been female dominated. I learned everything that I know about UX from my mentor, who was a female, and she is the best writer that I know. She's the best UX writer. She's the best general writer. She is. I still talk to her on a weekly basis, and any questions that I have from the week, we sort of have this touch point on Fridays where I'll take them all to her, and she'll give me all the answers that I need. On my two previous teams, I would say that it's probably 75% females on the team. So, maybe in the larger context, it might be male dominated, but in my experience, that hasn't necessarily been the case.
Tripti and Pat, I'll just follow up on that. I think tech is male dominated, but tech writing tends to be, for all sorts of reasons that could be analyzed, a site within tech that tends to have more women. And my first experience tech writing was as a proposal writer at RTI, and there were a lot of women in that group. A lot of people doing tech writing. Probably, Pat, I don't know if it's an interesting fact that one of the first words I can remember learning, because I went into started doing tech writing without really much experience in it. A word that I remember having to adjust to was the word deliverable, which was in one of the first things which means, for those who don't know, this is a package of usually writing, like a proposal, that is supposed to be present at a certain date or time or location. And So this is something that is delivered. And anyway, I don't know, maybe that has some resonance with Tripti's question, Ray, gender and tech writing.
Yeah. I have a couple of thoughts floating around my head right now. You know, one thing from a language perspective that's been really interesting to me is that the corporate world has this like way of almost dehumanizing people. I mean, this sort of transcends just gender, but like, you know, really production-based teams will say things like, hey, like, do you have the bandwidth to do something? It's, you know, almost like turning you into a computer. Like and that's, you know, seen all throughout every field in the corporate world. And there's additional examples besides that one, but that one is always super interesting to me. I think it was one of the first ones that I came across, and I was like, that's kind of jarring.
All right, we're pushing up past 6, so I'm gonna stop things right here. But if you do have more questions, please feel free to either send them to me or to David or Tripti or to your professor. And if there's specific questions for Pat, we can get them to him. And if if you're looking to get into this field and you do want to pick Pat's brain, as he said, he's open to that. So just let us know and we can set y'all up with email. But thank you. I just want to thank you again for coming out. It's been a great time. Thank you for all the students who came out. Real quick plug, we will have one more English Future Speaker Series coming up next month. So look for details about that to come in the future. But yeah, just join me in thanking Pat for taking time out of his hectic day to talk with us. So
thank you so much for having me.